Okay, if you've reached this video, I think you're possibly thinking about buying the 15-inch MacBook Air. If so, I've got loads of thoughts. I've been using this for a year. Time really does fly. It was over a year ago now that I was at the top of the Rockefeller Center with this laptop trying to take a thumbnail for the review video by holding it above the New York skyline. I was the only person doing that up there that day. I don't think anyone has ever done it before or since, so I'm waffling now. Basically, it's been a year since I first got this, and it's time for an updated review, because if you're thinking about buying one of these, I can guarantee you've been going backwards and forwards between this and the 13-inch version and possibly even the MacBook Pro. And now we have the M3 version, which I reviewed a little while ago, but I appreciate you may want some longer term thoughts on this laptop, and that's what this video is all about. So today I am going to help you buy the right laptop. I think it is this one, not this one specifically, obviously, but I do think if you're thinking about the 15-inch MacBook Air, you're onto something. Before we get onto it, just a very quick word from today's sponsor, which is Trend Micro and the fantastic Cleaner One Pro. And Cleaner One Pro is a fantastic app that helps you remove junk and very large files from your Mac. I work with huge video files all the time, and quite often, in fact, always, I end up leaving them scattered on my SSD without even knowing about it. And Cleaner One Pro shows exactly what is taking up space, where it's taking up space, and then gives you the ability to get rid of those files without hunting them down in the Finder app. It's so convenient. And you can do a quick clean, which does exactly what it says on the tin, or you can use the System Optimizer to take a much more detailed look at your hard drive. But one of my favorite things in Cleaner One Pro is the duplicate photos feature, which helps you sniff out those photos that you've taken multiple times. So if you're trying to take a photo of your dog, for instance, or your kid, and you keep pressing the shutter button, with Cleaner One Pro you can find those duplicate photos and get shot of all of the duplicates. There is a lot more to Cleaner One Pro though. There's a disk map so you can see exactly what's in specific folders. There's a startup manager, which is better than the startup manager in macOS. There's a duplicate files feature, which does the same thing as the duplicate photos feature I mentioned a moment ago. And there's even a file shredder if you want to completely get rid of anything. There's also a very handy toolbar that sits at the top of your screen, which monitors CPU usage, the network, memory usage, and gives you a quick scan for junk files. Cleaner One Pro is fantastic. It's the first thing that goes onto any Mac in this studio. I think you'll be the same. To find out more, just click that link below. Okay, let's talk about the spec that I chose for this MacBook Air. Now, bear in mind that this is an M2 version, so you can't actually buy this version brand new now. You can only get the M3 version, which I'll come on to a bit later. Just for, old time's sake, this is what's inside here. So it's got the base model M2 chip with the 8-core CPU, the 10-core GPU, 8GB of unified memory, and 256GB of SSD storage. It also came with a 35-watt dual USB-C charger, which is really useful and which I've lost. It's somewhere in a hotel room in France, I think, and I really miss it. And this cost me 1,399 quid in the UK last year. That's 100 quid more than the current M3 version, which is interesting. And also, a lot of people ask me, not a lot of people, some people occasionally ask me, do I go with AppleCare? And no, I never do. I don't think I've ever bought AppleCare. The reason being, I know I'm tempting fate here. In my experience, Apple products are, touch some wood, stop laughing at the back, bulletproof. Please stop laughing at the back. Now, if I had my time again, wouldn't we all love that? I would do two things differently. The first thing is that I would go for 16 gig of unified memory over 8. Let me very quickly kind of summarize what I think about 8GB versus 16GB. I think if you're going for the 13-inch MacBook Air and you don't want to spend any more than the base model costs, and you don't need it for any more than just general admin duties, email, web stuff, writing, normal stuff, go for it. Trust me, it will be absolutely fine. The 15-inch version, it has this air about it, if you excuse the pun. There's something about this laptop that says, upgrade me, give me as much stuff in here as possible. And I think it's to do with this big display, because in my experience with this one, the 8GB version of the 15-inch MacBook Air, it feels a little bit hamstrung at times. It feels a bit hesitant occasionally. The best way to describe this is when on macOS, there's a brilliant screensaver option where you open your laptop and it's kind of a drone shot of a beautiful location. As you log into macOS, it gradually stops and becomes your desktop background. On this, that animation can be a bit kind of like that occasionally, and I've not seen that on my MacBook Pro, for instance, or my Mac Mini. And I think going for the 16 gig version, and potentially the other thing that I would possibly have done differently is up the storage. I think if I'd gone for the 16 gig version and let's say the 1 TB version to get rid of any issues to do with NAND chips and all that stuff, I think it would feel like a more robust machine. Now, a massive caveat here is the fact that it's still a very robust machine. I don't sit there in the morning when I'm writing and stuff thinking, oh, this is like a Windows laptop. It's nothing like that at all. It's still a very quick machine. A lot of that is thanks to macOS, which is just fantastic. My one piece of advice about this is to spend as much money as possible to avoid any kind of buyer's remorse and to end up with a laptop that is going to last you for years and years. And on that note, let's talk about durability. This is the Starlight version, which is basically a very, very light kind of goldish colour. It's very understated, it's very premium looking, it's very lovely, basically. Boy, am I glad I went for it. I've not cleaned this at all for about 6 months, and that's as bad as it gets. Now, admittedly, that does look a little bit bad, but I have a huge key light here, a massive light shining onto this laptop. Most people don't have that, and most people don't spend all their time going, has it got any smudges? You just don't do that. In normal lighting conditions, it looks like it doesn't pick up any smudges whatsoever, which is more than can be said for certain darker coloured MacBook Airs. And I'm going to stick my neck out here. Ready? Wait for it. I think this combination of 15-inch MacBook Air and Starlight as the colour is the best looking MacBook ever. And by default, that means it's the best looking laptop ever. Fight me in the comments if you don't agree, but for me, whenever I see this in the kitchen, sitting there on the breakfast table, it just looks stunning. And if you're wondering, yes, the keys do go shiny. You can see that here. I've never owned a MacBook that doesn't have shiny keys after a while. It's just part and parcel of ownership. That said, I think that shininess looks less of a problem on this Starlight colour. This Starlight colour, guys, is the one to go for. The screen itself is brilliant. Why isn't Touch ID working? There we go. I'm not sure what's happened there. Something weird has happened to the desktop background. Ooh, it's gone fully grey. Again, that could come back to what I was saying earlier about giving this thing enough power inside. I don't know, but there you go. It should be a mountain range or something, but it's not there. Anyway, now, admittedly, this does not go anywhere really apart from my kitchen table. That's still quite a perilous occupation, and the reason for that is because, as I mentioned, it's in the kitchen, so it gets moved around without me knowing about it, which is frightening every single time. Things get put on it, I'll go outside, come back in, and then there's a set of keys on the top of it, and you just think, why would anyone do that? Trust me, I have cleaned it previously, and there's not a single scratch, dent, ding, mark. There's nothing on this thing at all. It looks absolutely brand new, and it's even survived 2 inadvertent dustings of icing sugar. So durability, absolutely amazing. Okay, let's talk about performance, and we have talked about this quite a bit already in this video, so I won't labour the point too much. However, I think, given that the M2 15-inch MacBook Airs are now awash on the second-hand market, and I would guess the pricing is pretty good. I've not looked into it, but I'd guess you can pick up a 15-inch MacBook Air M2 version for pretty good money at the moment. I'd understand if you're thinking about doing that. The only thing I would say is that the M2 chip was a tricky time for Apple, I think, really. It wasn't a huge problem, and it was something that was fairly confined within the tech space in terms of the commentary about it. We can't get away from the fact that the base model M2 MacBook Air, both the 13 and 15-inch, had and still have performance issues because Apple changed the configuration of the storage. If you are thinking about getting a second-hand M2 15-inch MacBook Air, please go for one with at least 16 gig of unified memory, and I'll double check this and put it down below, but either the 512 or the 1 terabyte of storage, because those ones don't have the same NAND chip issue. However, I would recommend spending a little bit more if you can and getting the M3 version, and the general consensus is it's quite a big upgrade over the M2 edition. Trust me, guys, if you go for the 15-inch MacBook Air, even if you're just thinking it's going to be my main admin laptop, it'll take a couple of months, if that, for you to start thinking, maybe I should get into video editing. It's happened to me as well. I've rapidly turned this into something that is going to be used in a music project, which I'll talk about at some point. And also, I've looked at it quite often and thought, oh, if I'd had more memory and a bit more storage, this would have been a fantastic alternative as a video editing device or laptop compared to my very expensive MacBook Pro. And this leads me to my inevitable conclusion about the 15-inch M2 or M3 MacBook Air. I absolutely love this laptop. It's not my favourite MacBook Air ever because the M1 MacBook Air exists, and that will forever be my favourite MacBook ever, ever, ever. This is a very close second. It's just a wonderful, wonderful machine. And yes, if you get the spec right and if you pick the right colour, it will last you a very long time. So if you've been toying with the idea of buying one of these for a little while now, just go for it. And if you're thinking about getting the M3 version, which I really, really think you should, keep watching for a link to my full review.